Hey, I'm Mary Portzen, and I just finished a conversation with Kim Sorrell, and it went so fast. It was a wonderful time, and we hope that you'll join us and listening to Kim's show.
Welcome to the show. I'm so glad that you are here. You are going to be so glad that you are here. I have got a guest today that has been through some things, who is so resilient, who is so talented, an incredible writer and author. She's done so many things in life, and she's got so much wisdom to share. And we're going to get into all of that. And I'm so excited that you're here for it, because I can't wait for the conversation. And so hopefully you can't wait for the conversation either. I'm Kim Sorrell. I'm a speaker. I'm an author. I get to do a lot of fun things in life, but my favorite by far is meeting people. And I get to meet some absolutely incredible people. And today is absolutely no exception. Mary, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, I'm so happy that you're here. So, Mary, before we get into a lot of stuff, I want people to know you, to really know you. Who's Mary down deep inside? And so I would love to hear about 8-year-old Mary.
8-year-old Mary. Oh, we're going back. We're going back a ways, aren't we?
A couple
Eight
years.
year 8-year-old Mary lived in a. I had 9 siblings and a father and mother who worked really hard to take care of us, but never ever escaped poverty. So 8-year-old Mary had her built-in playmates with her siblings. Not a lot of money, but didn't even realize there was money to be had somewhere, because it wasn't until I went to school that I realized, oh, I was called the poor kid, the poor girl. And so that girl retreated into books, and besides her family being her friends, her siblings being her friends, books were her friends. And I wanted nothing more than to someday write a book or be a librarian. Those two goals. I've been both. so I got my wish. Escaped poverty not until actually I raised 8 children on a small income. To me, it wasn't poverty compared to what I had lived with my parents struggling all the time. But there was still struggles raising 8 kids with one income. There's always going to be struggles. So I kind of added to the income with home businesses, with my writing, which a lot of us know is not a lot of money. So coupon queen of the world. Graduated from college, and I got married the first year of college, and yet managed somehow to graduate from college. But my real learning came in the home from the reading I did, and eventually I lost a spouse in 2012. I had 3 of my 8 children still at home, and kind of a lot of changes after that. So that's no longer 8-year-old Mary, but
Yeah. Well, anytime someone who comes from an impoverished family graduates from college, that's gigantic. That's huge to be able to do that, because it's not easy. It's not easy for kids to go to school, and especially if there's no nest egg, no money, no way to do it, then that makes it all the more difficult. And to get married and still finish college, that's another gigantic thing. Like I had that with my with 2 of my sons actually, but their wives both finished college, and one of them has a master's, and I'm just so proud of them. They got married young and doing great, whatever. But that's a big thing to do that. And then you had 8 kids, which is also a gigantic thing. My husband comes from a family with 8 kids, and there's something beautiful about a big family. But then you lost your husband. Tell me about that.
and that feels like a whole another life from that point on. So in 2012, I was 52 years old, and my husband passed away. He survived cancer and survived a heart attack, only to die at home after he got home from the hospital after his heart attack. And 3 children still at home. Actually, I had 4, but he left my oldest, or my son, who was living with me at the time, was almost 18. So he left as probably as soon as he could to get away from this house full of crying women. And so I had an 8-year-old, a a 12-year-old and a 16-year-old at home. But that started me down a whole new path and a whole new journey, not just with learning who was I without a spouse, who was I outside of a wife and mother. So it kind of started me down that path of figuring out, even what kind of clothes I like to wear or whatever, because I'd been so immersed in mothering and taking care of a spouse who had cancer. And then, so it started me down a path of faith too. So I turned to God because I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to be this widow, that word that doesn't sound like a 52-year-old. And I ended up obtaining a grief certificate and becoming a grief counselor. I ended up starting retreats, like a grief retreat, a writers conference, and I actually signed 8 book contracts in the space, or 7 book contracts, I'm sorry, in the space of the following 8 years. So it was like this huge, huge change for me, and learning who I was outside of spouse and mother. And I was widowed for 9.5 years and I found fantastic jobs because my writing at home and my home businesses and my degree all gave me ability to find work as a librarian, work as eventually a program coordinator.
And 7 book contracts. That is incredible.
I mean, it boggles my mind when I think about it. It can't be me. It has to be my faith journey too. And it was 9.5 years of being alone before I met a widower, and we are now married. We were married within 6 weeks of meeting each other, and we now coordinate a writers conference together, and we have written a book together. So, I mean, something he never would have imagined doing. So it's been a journey of, I mean, it boggles my mind, the changes in my life and what I had to do and what I figured out how to do, and not just by myself, but my faith grew a lot through those experiences.
Yeah. Well, I was 47 when my husband passed away, and I would get together for a while. I got together with women that were around my age, a little bit younger. Most of them, I think, I was the oldest one in the group, I believe, that also recently had lost their spouse, lost their husband, and some of them, every other one of them had kids at home. I was the only one that my kids were all grown when my husband passed away. And I said to them one time, we'd go to dinner like once a month, and it was so good, because it's so good to be around people who understand what you're going through, right? Who don't just sympathize, but are walking the same path, right? And so one time I said to them, man, I don't know how you guys do it. Like I with kids at home and all of that. I mean, at least I don't have kids at home. And they looked at me and they said, oh my gosh, we were talking about, we don't know how you do it with no kids at home, that you're just home alone. Like, how do you do that? And so everybody, looks at everybody else's life and thinks whatever, but it is a whole new reimagining. I was married when I was 18 and for almost 29 years. And so that's who I was. I was a married adult, in a great relationship. And to figure out who you are, man, when you're talking about that, Mary, I feel your pain, because it is such a shift. And I think it's a spiritual shift, right? Because, you get married before God and the two become one. There's something very spiritual about the union of a marriage, that the two become one in heart in so many ways. Even though you're still two people, there is just something beautiful that happens. And so when you don't have that person anymore, it's like, well, guy, it's like getting an arm cut off or something. You lose a part of yourself. And so it's not just mourning them, but it's also mourning the life you thought you had, right? The plan for the future, what you think is going to happen, what life is going to look like, and all the dreams, all the stuff. You lose a lot more than just someone you love. So yeah. So it was. What was your journey like to figure it out? Like,
it's so funny that you say you were the oldest in the group that you found. I didn't know any widows when, and I was 52. I didn't know any widows outside of my mother, and she had died 17 months before my husband did. So there was like nobody to talk to. So I tried forming this group of widower and widows. And I was the youngest in the group at 52. So we had a lot of 80-year-olds and 70-year-olds. So I kind of fell through these cracks. And then I met a group of young women who said, oh, because you have children at home, you could come into our group. And then I would have been the old one there, even though I had the young children. So it was like I just fell through cracks. And I would say those first 18 months, I really spent a lot of time, quiet time, which I had not done, raising 8 kids, and I homeschooled too. So I had never had like that quiet time, but I gave myself that quiet time. I knew that with the life insurance policy, I had maybe 18 months before I had to find work. And so I gave myself that gift of those 18 months to be quiet, to spend time thinking, who am I? What am I going to do? And just to have that stillness that we all need. And yeah, when it's quiet and I know so many widows who keep so busy, so they don't have to think and they don't have to face that, but we have to face it. And so I was studying grief and reading books about grief, and just thinking, well, we got to be built and designed for this. So there's got to be a way to handle it, a right way to handle it, or our way to handle it. So I was journaling. I'd never journaled before, even though I was a writer. And I was naturally turning to more creative endeavors, spending time looking at the sunset and rainbows and smelling the grass and stuff. It's like as if losing somebody very important made me all of a sudden appreciate every little thing in the world and just notice things. And so I feel like I was gifted with those 18 months before I found work. And then when I went to find work, I actually had the gall to ask if I could bring my homeschooled kids with me to work. And they said yes. So it's like, oh, okay. So I had a job at a library as a library director, and my 2 youngest girls were there, especially my youngest girl was there. And, so it wasn't seamless, but it was like finding yourself and I started reading the Bible. I started praying. I didn't have that relationship with God that I developed through grief. I lost my mother. I lost a husband 17 months later. And then 17 months after that, I lost a grandson, 8-year-old grandson. And so I had to hang on to something. And so that's what I ended up. It was a journey that I don't regret. It's too bad that it had to be from loss that I went in that direction, but my faith is so much stronger. And, so it was a journey that I was not alone in. I felt alone in the fact that I did not know other people who had gone through this. My own siblings, none of them had lost a spouse, and I didn't personally know. I got to know those 80-year-old and 70-year-old people who were going through that. And that's why I kind of got to the point where I wanted to help other people through this, because I was studying the science. I knew we were built and designed to handle this. And I was finding through expressive writing or journaling that maybe I could help other people through that. So I started doing workshops on expressive writing for healing. I wrote a book about expressive writing. I was down this path that when I look at it, when people say you're so strong or whatever, well, no, you're not. You just do what you have to do, and you get strength through doing some of those things.
Yeah, so true. So true. And yeah, writing is such a great healer. There's no doubt about it. One thing that I found out that nobody had ever told me is that service is such a great healer too. And when you get outside yourself and you go help other people, man, it's such a great healer of grief. And it's like, grief is such a funny thing. I'm writing a book on grief right now because we tend to judge each other's grief. We think that, oh, she should be over it. I always hated that term, be over it. I don't think you ever are over it. I think you can get on top of it. You can get out from underneath it. But you're never over it. My husband will always be part of my life. Your husband will always be part of your life. It's just the way it is. You're not going to get over it, but you can get on top of it, and you can, get to a day that you're not crying that day. You get to a week where you got 2 days, you're not crying, and then get to a month where maybe only 6 days you cried, or whatever. Gradually things change for you, but it's on your timeline. It's on your very own timeline. And I don't know that you can hurry it. I think you deal with it however you deal, no judgment. Like, everybody just needs to deal with grief the way they deal with grief. And yeah, there's help, like you going and getting certified as a grief counselor. You know, there's help through grief, but at the same time, you know, I think not judging each other's grief is a big deal. Like, just let people grieve, be there for them, be kind, say kind things. You know,
Well,
don't.
that's a good one. Be kind. Gratitude. I developed a Tuesday morning ritual for that first 2 years because my husband died on a Tuesday and I started to dread Tuesdays. Oh no, it's Tuesday. Now it's 3 weeks. Now it's 4 weeks and stuff. So that Tuesday morning ritual is I would get up on Tuesday morning and think, well, who am I going to reach out to today? Who am I going to send a card to? Who am I going to send a little gift to and stuff? And so I started doing that. And that got me through a couple of years. And then the gratitude, like you said, gratitude journal, I would start to like try to find one thing that day, just one thing that I could be grateful for. And it might be a cashier at a grocery store asking how you're doing or smiling or something, you know, it could be something little, but there's always something to be grateful for. And it is, you're right, it is our own journey and there is no right or wrong way. There's just your way. And I had to learn all of that. And we each have to learn, you know, somebody else might find journaling not helpful. Another person might want to do art or create something in the honor of the person, or gardening and making beautiful flowers, you know, just to bring joy to your neighborhood. But yeah, I think COVID kind of taught us that too. We are there to help each other. And if we can reach out to each other, everybody's fighting their own private battle. And I think the grieving people are the most vulnerable people of all, because that's when you can go in a wrong direction or, you know, make bad choices because of your vulnerability.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that that's so true. Sometimes you see that with marrying, you know, right away, or you know, looking for that answer to your loneliness, and sometimes it's not the right person. And yeah, but man, I give those people so much grace, because holy cow, you know, it is such a void, and uh, some people just need somebody else in their life, and don't want to wait for it, you know, and wonder what's even out there. And I can tell you from my experience, it's been 16 years, 16 years since my husband passed away. It's 2009. And from my experience, it's not easy to find a man out there my age who is sane and normal-ish, you know, like yeah, yeah, it's not easy. So how did you, so you're going through this whole path though, where you're getting book deals. Okay. So I know so many authors, Mary, who've never gotten a book deal, who have gotten rejected time after time after time, years in between book deals. Some authors that they have only published through a publisher, but it's a rejection, you know, 18 months of that. And then finally somebody saying yes. And it's painful, but you had like a deal a year, which is amazing.
It's crazy to think. And I just showed a young woman who wants to break into traditional publishing. And I showed her, I said, let me show you something. First, I showed her a picture of me with a baby on my back typing on a typewriter. And I said, because she's pregnant, I said, you know, don't say someday, you know, you could start looking for a publisher now, and you know, you might need to do some editing on this piece and stuff. But then I showed her a list on paper of all the places I had submitted this one book that I was trying to sell about couponing. And it was page after page of rejections and stuff. And she was just looking, she said, how could you stand it? And I said, well, I must be either very stubborn or I don't know what I'm doing, but I was very intent on getting that book published. Well, that was the first book I signed for after my spouse died, but it had been after 2 agents, and I dropped the agents. And then after, I don't know how many submissions, and then I found the publisher that was a good fit, which is sometimes, I know writers who give up after one rejection. Oh, well, I submitted it somewhere and they said no. So I put it away in a file cabinet, and it's like, you know, that one, let me show you something. Let me show you these 83 rejections I got. So I think for writers, you kind of have to be a little bit stubborn and stuff, but you actually have to find the right fit. And maybe self-publishing will be the right fit, but so we talk about this in all the writers conferences that I do and stuff. So it was a journey of getting a lot of little articles published, and then bigger articles published. Sometimes I'd get paid $50. Sometimes a magazine would just send me a free magazine, and then chicken soup books and stuff. So it was a journey for me, and it won't be look like everybody else's journey, but that is a big thing to face rejection. And nobody likes to be rejected, but if you can just shake it off and think, well, maybe they published something else recently just like this, or maybe this is not exactly what they're looking for right now. And it's just a matter of persistence and a little bit of stubbornness. Same with looking for love, like what you said. Normally, when you said that, it's like, well, I knew there might be somebody out there for me, but I also knew there might not be somebody out there for me. So I did pursue online dating, and then got rid of it as fast as I could, because it was like, there is a lot of weirdos out there. There is. I mean, and so you just have to be careful. And, and the publishing world has changed so much too. So I don't know if anybody's looking for advice about publishing or finding a spouse, but I actually involve prayer in all of that. I involve prayer in both when I'm writing, or when I was kind of looking for love.
Yeah, which that's the way to go, right? I mean, yeah, the way to do it, right? And yeah, so the whole rejection thing, because yes, in love, in book publishing and whatever, and there are so many stories. Lucy Maud Montgomery, who back in the day, Anne of Green Gables, sitting in a hat box in the upstairs at the post office on Prince Edward Island, right? And she had to send it out by boat and then by mail to get to a publisher just to be rejected and have it sent back to her. And she did it time after time. Or Jack Canfield, Chicken Soup for the Soul, or the Chicken Soup series, man, I think 123.
I think it might have been over 300 rejections.
Oh, really?
If I remember correctly, or else
Yeah,
that's
it's a lot.
It was a lot, yes.
Huge number, that's for sure. And look at what it's done. It's sold well over 500 million copies now. And so, yeah, so persistence is a thing. I worked with a guy at one point in time who always said, every no is just one step closer to a yes. And I thought,
that's a good way to look at it.
Yeah. And it's true. Like you said, maybe the publisher just published a book like that, or that's not what they're looking for. I mean, they have certain things, certain genres that they publish, period, but also certain things at certain times, certain seasons. And maybe it just wasn't the right season, or it wasn't the right fit. And you'd rather have a publisher that's the right fit than a publisher who just will say yes, even though it's not going to fit in what they do. Yeah. So yeah. And then there's men who aren't the right fit.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how did you meet your husband?
So I think I kind of had decided I was probably never going to meet anybody 6 years out. And I was okay with that. I mean, I've missed a lot of things about love, the holding hands and the hugging and the kissing part of it. I really miss, and it's lonely. And then COVID hit, and it got really lonely because I was sent home to work for 6 months, and I was living with the youngest daughter, who was the only one of my 8 children who did not like to hug and did not say, I love you. And so I'm stuck with a kind of grouchy teenager who would grunt at me when I said goodnight, I love you, and COVID hit, and I think that made it more lonely. And some of those dating sites, I always looked at Christian dating sites, were actually offering like a free month because nobody was dating during that time. I can't even imagine what I thought would happen. You meet somebody in a park with a mask on your face, and you stand 6 feet apart maybe, and you yell at each other and to get to know each other. But I felt safe with that idea. So I stepped into the let's look and see what's out there type thing. And it was kind of scary. I mean, I remember one guy who said he'd never been married, never had children, and yet he was posing with an Elmo doll. Well, why do you have an Elmo doll? And then another with an elf hat on and elf tights, which I don't think look good on anybody. And so it was just, and then others that you think, well, they don't sound real, so, and you would find out it was just a fake account or something. So it's kind of scary. But it was that in 2018, because I was open to God, I heard that I was supposed to pray for my future husband, not pray for a future husband, but pray for him. And I obeyed that summons and wrote it down in my journal and then covered it up as quick as I could with drawing or paper or something because I was embarrassed, even though I had felt very strongly I was supposed to pray for my future husband. I thought, well, if I die in a car accident tomorrow, my kids are probably going to laugh at me because they're going to think, oh, poor mom. She wrote in her journal that she thought she was going to get a man, So I covered it up. And those years went by and COVID hit and I was alone. I was thinking, well, where is this man you promised me and that you told me to pray for? Where is he? And in 2021, I delved back into one of those Christian dating sites and I was about ready. I bet I was within hours of just deleting my profile again because it was just like, there is too much scary stuff out here and scary people. And this man reached out and he was a widower. And I knew enough that I could find him online because we can do that. We can find the human being online and stuff. And I could find his wife's obituary. So I knew he was real. And he was looking for what I was looking for. He was looking for a serious relationship with somebody who had a strong faith. And he was looking for a stronger faith. And so we connected. And I would say that first, I know for a fact that by the end of that first date, which was only 2 hours long, oh, this is the man that God asked me to pray for in 2018. So the next day, I told him we had to start our date with prayer, our next date, and he agreed. And I showed him, I lifted that picture up on my journal page and showed him. And he said, do you think that man was me? And I said, I know it was you, or I wouldn't have been showing you this. I thought I would never find out exactly what he was going through during that day that I was asked to pray for him, because he didn't journal. He didn't write anything down, not like I did. I could tell you what day and I had everything in my journal. And yet it was 2 years into our marriage that I was looking at his VA medical records and went back. I don't know what prompted me to go back to that date that I prayed for him. And he had fallen on the golf course and hurt so bad that he ended up in the ER and he was in such pain. So he was in emotional pain from losing his wife a few months before, but he was in physical pain too. And so that felt like, wow, God, this is so cool what you just did, as I now found out what he was going through that day when I prayed for him.
That very day that you're told to pray for him.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So what did he say when you pointed it out to him? Did he say, fine, here's a diamond, let's run down the aisle? Okay, I get it.
Well, we had that second, he was feeling the same way I was after that first date, because he texted me, well, after the second date, he texted me, he says, I know it's too soon. I know this sounds crazy, but I think I'm falling in love with you. So I'm so glad it was him who said that first. And then I got scared and I thought, well, it is too soon. And this is way too fast. But I have a mentor. He's in his 90s now, and he was in his 80s then. And he had lost a spouse, and he was such a spiritual and writing mentor for me that I connected with him after Nick texted me. And I said, he'd been praying for me. This man who was my mentor, been praying for me to find the right person. He knew how lonely I was. I said, this is weird, but he said he's fallen in love with me. And I think I'm falling in love with him, but it's way too soon. And he said, Mary, he said, everything that's happened in your life since you started developing this relationship with God has come to you this way. So why are you surprised when love comes to you this way? He said, this is exactly the way it happens. He says, that's what I said to my wife, like the second or third date. He said, because I knew this is the person that was for me. And he said, so just trust your feelings. So I trusted God. I wasn't so sure about my feelings. And I called him back and said, I think I'm falling in love with you too. So it went so fast and it felt like everything was right. But I kind of forgot about my poor children who were like watching what was happening with their mom. Now they knew I involved prayer in everything. So they weren't scared about that part of it. And the younger children who had seen their mother change so much, were, less surprised with the way things were happening. But I'm sure my older kids had a couple of like, what are you doing, Mom? types of ideas. And now they just love him so much. And they have so welcome. They push each other out of the way to give him a hug after a visit, so.
So nice. Yeah. So because you got married fast.
Yes, it was 6 weeks from our
Your
first
first
date
date.
until our wedding.
6 weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So my kids would totally freak out. They would probably not let me out of the house. They would kidnap me and not let me go get married because they would, at 6 weeks, it's not like your kids knew him well, I'm sure.
Yeah, no, they did not.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
And my youngest daughter had just turned 18 a week before I met him. So,
yeah.
and then all of a sudden I'm moving out of the house and getting married. But she handled it better than any. I found a letter that she had sent him, and I did not know about it. So she's an 18-year-old girl, and she sent him a letter thanking him for making her mom the happiest she's ever seen her mom. And I said, when did she send this to you? And he said, she sent it to me like 5 weeks after we met. So it's like, and she handled it very well. Her mom moving out, her mom getting married and stuff. And
Yeah.
This is a daughter who never hugged and never would say, I love you. But I tell you, COVID, when we started taking walks in the woods, she would talk to me. And so we took a lot of walks in the woods and a lot of hikes during COVID. And by the time I went back to work, her and I had gotten really, really close. So
So
sometimes
sweet.
I say thank you about COVID because
Yeah.
we did for that relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's got to be a silver lining, right? Like there's got to be the good that we can take out of it. Otherwise, it's just all bad. But yeah, relationships happen. There's things that happen during COVID that wouldn't have happened if it weren't for COVID. Not that you'd ever want it, not that you'd ever wish COVID hit the world, or anything, but you might as well look for anything you can, draw any good you can out of it. So that's pretty cool. That's so cool. What a great love story. And so you got married. What year did you get married?
We got married in August 2021.
August 2021. Okay. And so then you said, hey, buddy, let's write a book together.
It's funny because I did say something to him before we ever got married. I said, we're probably going to be writing a book about how different our relationship is and how, because we connected and put God at the center, which we did not really do with our first marriages. I mean, we loved our first spouse but we never connected the dots to put God at the center of it or to include prayer in it. And so when we started praying together, we made sure we prayed every day together. And I would even call him on the phone if we forgot after we got married. And I'd say, oh my gosh, we forgot to pray together, and we'd pray on the phone and stuff. So there was this huge difference in our marriage. But when I said something about writing a book together or speaking together, because I'd gotten used to doing workshops and speaking, he would just like shake his head and, you don't know what you're talking about. I had terrible grades in school and I would flunk the English classes and I don't even read much. And, it's like, but so we got married in 2021 and last year that book started coming. I mean, it had come, I was making notes and I was making an outline. I knew what the book was going to look like. And we had already talked in front of a couple couples groups about, this kind of marriage, how anybody can have this kind of marriage, but you just have to put God at the center of it and stuff. So he'd even spoke with me and I was a little more used to that than he was. But last year it started coming. I mean, by that, I mean, those notes created a chapter from me. And then I read that to him and I said, here's my part. Now what's your part? And he had a couple sentences. He may have even said ditto as if that's enough. And I thought, oh, this is what the book is going to look like, huh? I'm going to write and then you're going to give me a ditto or maybe. So he gave a little bit and then, so I would write as fast as I could because if we had to wait for him to type it or write it, it probably wouldn't ever have happened because his handwriting's so messy that even he can't read it sometimes. And his typing skills are not much better. But so I was writing as fast as he could talk. And then he had a breakthrough once, and he'd been talking to some other men, and talking about bowling scores, because he had been a big bowler at one point. And he came home from that talk with them because they wanted to know, well, what's it feel like when you're at the, I don't even know enough about bowling to say what they were asking, but score a 300 or whatever it is. Is it 700? It's a 700. See, I don't know anything about bowling, but he realized that he had changed so much, and he was a different person than that person who used to bowl, because he used to drink a lot. And so he came home, and he was just, all these words were coming out of him. I used to do this, and I'm not like that anymore. And you don't, I want to be a better person. And I said, can I write this down? Because what you are saying sounds like what we're talking about. What I want to talk about in the book is how we become different people, and how you and I are different people than was married to our first spouse, and how our life is so different and stuff. And he said, yes, I will share this. And so I wrote as fast as I could. And from that point on, each chapter that I would write, the first part, he had a lot to say. I mean, and he's very open about his life and about our journey together. And I'm very open. I'm used to being open, because as a writer, you have to be vulnerable, and you have to be transparent, or your writing is, hidden. It's kind of like the Facebook posts that you see, and their house looks perfect, and their food looks perfect, and their kids look perfect, and everything's perfect. Well, you're not going to reach people in their hearts if you look so perfect that they feel like you can't possibly understand their life. So we're very open in the writing, and very open in the book. And I don't know, there's just, he had to get through those first 3 years of marriage to get to the point where he could even see himself doing something that he'd never done before. And it's a wonderful book for couples to read together, because I think because of him, because of his open and vulnerability. And I really believe, and it's so funny, because I've been writing for almost 40 years. And when we sent it to beta readers who would read it first for, errors or problems with it, they would come back with, Mary, you need to change this, or Mary, you have a problem there, or Mary, I didn't understand what you meant there. And his part was like, no changes. Oh. Even the professional editor, when it got to that point, was having me change parts of mine, but not his. And I think it's because he was just so down to earth and so open and willing, this is the way it is, and he didn't, try to flower up the language or anything. It's just who he is. And it's, so I think men especially would get something out of reading his. I would say to a man, just read his part. You don't even need to read mine. Just read his part, because this will be helpful for your marriage.
Yeah, well, what a cool concept. What a cool book to do it together. And you had these shared experiences, many shared experiences, right? Like losing your spouse and all the things that you go through with that. But then also falling in love quickly. That was a pretty intense shared experience. And so, and to see the difference in a marriage when you put God at the center, as opposed to just, you might say yes at the altar, but then leave God out of it. And it's so much nicer, so much more wonderful, so much deeper, more fulfilling, easier, better when you do put God at the center and praying together and whatever. So that is so cool. That's so cool. I love it. I love it. And I love that your kids fell in love with him. So do he have kids too?
So he has 4 children, and I have the 8. And the youngest grandchildren are from my side. So we have a 5-year-old and a almost 2-year-old grandchild, and they see him as just grandpa, because that's the only grandpa on that side they knew. And then my older grandchildren also know him as grandpa, because most of them really didn't get to know their other grandpa and stuff. So, and his children are older than, like my youngest is 21, and his youngest is in her 30s. So I kind of,
yeah.
But my children, I think my daughter called him dad a couple times, the youngest, and she asked if it was okay. And but she was 8 years old when her dad died, and she had no father figure all those years. And so it was definitely okay with me, and with him, he was thrilled, and so there is that closeness. And it's wonderful to see my children love on him, because I think they kind of needed that. We all need a dad figure. We all need that. And like I said, if you got to know him or read parts of his book, he just is who he is. I mean, so that's refreshing for everybody involved, I think.
Yeah, so true, so true. So what about your kids getting along with his kids? Is there a relationship there, or the
There
age?
is not much. There was, I don't know all of what's going on with his children. He loves them dearly, and it's not me, but it's not necessarily good. And I wish it was, and we pray daily for that. But a daughter reached out to him just recently, and it was because of the book. She read
Yeah.
the book, and she wanted to meet that dad. And
Oh,
so she met that dad. In other words, he is a different person. And she said, you are different. And so I hope his other children get to that point. His son is talking to him too, because of the book, or partly because of the book.
wow.
And hopefully the other two will eventually get to know this new dad. I mean, what a gift to be able to get to know the new dad. And so I hope that happens.
Oh yeah, it'll happen. It'll happen. And the book being the catalyst is so wonderful, right? Like, because you could have said, no, God, I don't really want to write it, or he doesn't really want to write it, so we're not going to do it, but you did it. And if all that came from it was his daughter calling, it would have been worth it.
That's what I was going to say, is we both agreed, if that's all that comes from this book is your renewed relationship with that daughter, that's all, that's all we need. That's all we need out of it.
Yeah, no kidding, no kidding. And it can be so hard. Melding two families together, especially when they're adults. My mom died. I was in my 20s when my mom died. My dad remarried right away. And even though her kids, she had 4 kids, I have 2 brothers. And even though we were all the same age, we're so different, raised completely differently, 2 completely different homes. And we're these, crazy type A entrepreneurs, go, 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 go. And they have 8 to 5 jobs and are much more sane than we are. And so it just never worked. In fact, we tried to do Christmas together, like right at the beginning. And I thought it went great, but they do things different. Like they write a list, and then you pick out of the list what to buy, and they tell you what store and how much it is. And we're like, oh no, oh gosh, I was at the store and I saw this great thing I know my brother will love, whatever. So even so different in that way. But I thought Christmas went great. And I talked to my dad a couple of days later. I said, well, that was fun. Christmas was fun. And he said, yeah, we won't be doing that again. And I said, what? Why? And he said, we're a little too intense for them, because, we get together and you talk business because we're all doing business, or, we talk about the things we talk about that aren't things they talk about. So we were too intense for them, which I totally get. We are, we're crazy people. I get that. It comes from my father. It's his fault. So
I think you get along with my family fine.
yeah.
My children.
Yeah, well, good. That's good to know. But yeah, so it can be really difficult. You hear about, once in a while, there's a great story about families just really kind of embracing each other. But I think more often than not, that's not the case, because it's just hard. People have their own lives, and it can be really difficult too, I think, for kids to see their mom or their dad with somebody who's not their mom or their dad. And that can be hard. So
And I worried about that with my kids, but I haven't seen it and I haven't felt it. And I did have to have a talk with a couple of my older kids, just, like to explain different things. But my daughter said, because we explain in our book how we are not the same person that was married to my kid's dad, or he's not the same person that was married to his kid's mom, because it can help explain why this is so different and why this is. And my daughter said, you handled it well, because I was scared. And she read it and she said, Mom, I want you to know you handled it well. I understood, what you were talking about, and they understand the love that, and I think they're so happy to see their mom. They saw me alone for 9.5 years, and um, they see the happiness. They can see the difference. People will say, "Oh my gosh, you look so much younger. What's going on? You must be in love or something." I say, "Yeah, I'm in love. It's a good thing. It's all good."
Yeah. Oh, that's so funny. Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. And because of the years in between and they saw that you were lonely, that probably does help. But and hopefully losing a spouse, not losing a spouse, hopefully 9 years later, whatever, you're a different person, right? Like we should be always constantly evolving and learning and growing in wisdom, hopefully. And, as you age, hopefully you don't stop growing, you don't stop learning. So I know I'm different than I was 10 years ago and 10 years before that. In fact, I've often wondered, like, why is it that there's all these books for babies, right? What to expect when you're expecting, or things on toddlers, or the strong-willed child or whatever, and books on adolescence and on teens, how to deal with teens, and then it stops. And it's like, well, there should be a book about how to get through your 20s, or your 30s. They're different than your 20s. Your 40s are different than your 30s or your 20s. Like there could be ongoing books through the ages, because every time is so different. It's a different season of life, and you're in a different place, and you're experienced more and different things. I mean, it just all comes together to create a hopefully always a better version of ourselves, right? Like hopefully we're getting this life, we're getting it down a little bit better as we go through it and as we learn. So
I
yeah.
call it lifelong learning. I even started a group when I was a librarian of lifelong learners, because I
Oh,
think what a sad situation if a person isn't growing and isn't learning, and there's so many opportunities. I think a lot of people saw that during COVID too. Is because all of a sudden they were home and they learned they loved cooking, or they started cooking more. Maybe they went out in the garden more and stuff, and they saw this creativity blossoming and stuff. And so this lifelong learners group, we were bound and determined. And it ended up being mostly women in their 50s and 60s. There was a few younger women. We were bound and determined to try new things. And so we'd play ukuleles once, or we would
oh, fun.
paint, and not have this, like, it has to be perfect. It has to look a certain way. We have to play this instrument beautifully, just for fun. And so every month, I kind of miss that, because every month we would try something different, and we could do that on our own, of course, but try something different and not worry about what it looks like.
Oh my gosh, that's such a great idea. That's so fun. Yeah, yeah, I love that. Yeah, because sometimes it takes a little pushing to try something new. And when you do it with other people, how much more enjoyable is that? And when they stink at it too, then you don't feel so bad because you're brand new at it. So how fun. I love that. I love that idea. That is really fun. And writing, you were talking about how journaling, how healing that was for you. I found the same. Writing is so healing, and I do think for so many people it is just so healing. And it's like you don't have to do anything with it. You don't really have to feel pressured to ever go back and read it, even. Like it just the getting it out on paper. There's just something about that is so healing. What do you think that is? And as you studied
There's
it.
there's definitely science behind it. Just the act of writing. So if you're handwriting, just the act of getting those thoughts out down on paper, you're pausing, you're meditating a little bit, so that itself, just that physical act. You could do it on the computer, but that physical act of handwriting will calm you down, slow you down, just like the adult coloring books. I mean, so there's that aspect of it. And then there's the aspect of getting the brain down. I mean, just getting all those thoughts and feelings down. And I tell people, well, it doesn't matter if it's messy. So what? You could even rip it up and throw it away when you're done with it. It's just the act of dumping all those thoughts out of your brain. You start to work things through in your mind. Don't go out and buy the beautiful leather-bound journal and a fancy pen, thinking, because you're going to be held back from your actual messy thoughts if you think you have to have your handwriting look a certain way. So it's the act of writing, the brain dump itself, and then if you can incorporate into your journaling eventually a little bit of gratitude, find something to be thankful for. I pray in my journals, I whine in my journals, I cry in my journals, but I'm happy in my journals too, and I actually do go back and look at them, and it has helped me before to go back and say, oh, I am really doing a lot better than I was that first year after I lost a spouse. Or, oh, I faced this once before. I can go back and look and say, and this is what I found that helped me. Or somebody else's words. I'll journal and I'll write words that I read in a book that day, or a Bible verse or something and stuff. So I love my journals, and I love just seeing them all lined up and stuff. But the actual act of writing itself can be helpful, or getting those thoughts out. And I told my daughter when she hesitated about journaling, she goes, I got a lot of icky thoughts because I lost a son. I got a lot of thoughts I really don't want anybody else seeing. I says, well, just write them down. Just use notebook paper, write them down, just light a match, or bury him where he's buried. Bury your words in the dirt, and just, because you'll get some healing from just writing them down. So journaling can be pretty if you want the fancy journals and you like how they look and stuff. And you're actually, if you leave them, don't write and think somebody's going to look at it. You can always get rid of the journals, but it doesn't hurt if we leave behind our words, because I have some of my mom's words, and I can see her as a human being. I can see her as a mother of 10 children. I can see her because of the writing that she left behind. It's actually letters for her. Her mother saved her letters, and so I have all those, and those are treasures. So I think someday down the road, it's not going to hurt my kids to read my journals and see, if they are going to be widowed or become a widow, they'll see how their mom got through it. They'll see that journey, and they'll see the journey of faith in those journals and stuff. So I don't mind the idea of leaving them behind. Every once in a while, I'll hesitate about writing something, and I'll just rip that page out of the journal because I think, okay, I wrote that for me. We can get rid of that.
Yeah. I want the kids to see that someday.
Yeah.
So about your daughter and your 8-year-old grandson, my word, that is heart-wrenching, just so heartbreaking. Did she start journaling? Like, has that helped her? How is she doing?
She blogged through his entire cancer journey. So that was 3 years. He was diagnosed a month after she lost her grandmother. And then he got through a lot of treatment, and she was blogging through that treatment. A very brave, faith-filled woman. Is when I look at her old blog posts, I'm just like, wow, my daughter was helping other parents who had children with cancer, and other parents who were facing difficult stuff. And then he went through a brief period when he was in remission, and then it came back. The cancer came back. But this little boy, my grandson, he was just such a loving, giving person that even though he had to spend 30 days in a cancer ward after having a stem cell transplant, or he was at the hospital more than at home for a lot of those 3 years, and she was with him. He would save his cupcakes at the hospital for his siblings, or he would save his money so that he could go down to the gift shop and buy gifts for his siblings. Or during that brief period of remission, that little boy asked his mom if he could collect toys for the kids that were still in the hospital. I mean, so that's the kind of person we lost, is a little boy, that kind, that loving. And yet my daughter never lost her faith, never, and she grew so much in her faith that you could see that on her blog. But as soon as he died, she stopped her blog. She stopped writing. I hope someday she can write about that experience. I've looked at her old blog posts. They'd make a wonderful book, but she'd have to write an ending. What's it like, 12 years later, and a beginning of what's it like for a mom to see this happen to her child. But we decided, both she and I, that because of him, because of having him in our life, we were going to be better people. And so after he died, we started doing random acts of kindness in his name. And I'll still do that once in a while. I have these cards that say, this random act of kindness was brought to you in honor of this little boy, and got the dates on there. And we can do that in loss. We can decide we're going to be better people instead of bitter people, better people because of that person, in honor of that person, the best of them. Let the best of them live on. And so I hope someday she I've told her I would love to help you get this published, and she's not ready yet because she'd have to write that final chapter. But I think someday that book will come out and it will help other people, because she really showed a tremendous faith during that time, and she faced his death before I was willing to face it. I thought the grandma was going to save him. I'm going to find the right the right clinical trial drug. I'm going to go to Mayo. I'm going to go call St. Jude's Hospital. And I did. I called and called and called, and they all said the same thing. We'd be doing the same thing that your local hospital is doing. And I had to face, oh, we are going to lose him. And she faced that before I did.
That's I'm so sorry. That I don't know. You don't really want to compare grief. That's another thing about grief, is like everybody's grief is their own, right? But losing a child, I just think it has to be the hardest thing to endure, the hardest thing to go through is losing a child. I can't imagine.
And that's one reason why I was reading about grief, and I was facing my own grief and bereavement and the science of bereavement. But the reason I wanted the certificate is I thought it would help me help the people that I didn't know how to help, the people who have lost a child, and the people who have faced somebody who took their own life. And those two, I just did not. How do you help somebody get through that? It was not really the grief certificate that helped me, although it gave me a few good ideas, but it was watching my daughter and how she handled things, and just knowing you can survive. You can survive somehow losing a child. You can survive losing somebody who took their own life, so that's tough. I mean, you're right. You can't compare grief, but different kinds of grief are different, and we can acknowledge that and realize the same things might help the same person. Journaling might still help that person who lost a child, or creating something in their memory, like we did the random acts of kindness in his memory and stuff. So I'd like to say there's tools available to all of us, and we have to find the right tools that will work for us. I wouldn't change a light bulb for months after my husband died. There was light bulbs out in my house, and it didn't make sense to me. And one day, one of my older daughters came, and she was flipping the switches in the hallway, and it was dark, and she goes, "Is there something broken?" And I said, "Well, no." And I reluctantly admitted that the light bulb had died, and I just hadn't changed it. And my other children were, "Mom, what are you talking about? We thought it was broken or something." "You mean we've been walking around in the dark all these months, and all you need to do is get up on a ladder and change the light bulb?" And I said, "Yeah." And then I thought, that's grief. We have the tool. I had a light bulb. I had a ladder, but we have to figure out, how are we going to do this, or we just have to take advantage of those tools. So if we can find out what it is that will help us, whether, like you said, journaling or gardening or cooking or doing things in honor of the person, or just feeling grateful or doing things for others, like you said, serving others, we've got the tools. We just have to use them.
Right. Oh my gosh, what a great analogy that is. It's so true. So true. Oh man. Yeah. Well, I don't blame you on the light bulbs, I gotta say. Like when I had to take the trash out every week, I did that. I was so angry. I have to this is wrong. I shouldn't have to take the trash out. Just kind of the silliest things that can happen. But yeah, I mean, eventually you change the light bulb. Eventually you get the tools. Right. You might not be ready for the tools right away, but eventually you get ready for them, and then you use them and find them worthwhile, find them helpful. So I love that analogy. It's so good. Mary, we're out of time. I cannot believe it. This has been so great. Where can people find you and your books and this book, and tell everybody how to connect with you?
So 7 of my books are written under Mary Potter Kenyon. So you can find me on Facebook and Instagram under Mary Potter Kenyon. And then my husband and I together, I took his name, so it's Mary Portzen now, Mary and Nick Portzen. We wrote Soulmates Path to a Praying Partnership, and we have a Facebook page, Soulmates Path to a Praying Partnership, and we're starting to do some fun videos, and we're going to do more of that on there, so you can find us on Facebook and on YouTube. We have a little
yeah, I love your YouTube channel. It's so funny. It's so fun to watch you know, your new Hello Fresh, you know, and what you're going to cook that day and whatever. Anyway, it's really good. It's really good. And I can tell that you guys are just so connected. It's really fun. But yes, buy the book, and don't just buy a copy of the book, but think of somebody that could really use this. Think of somebody who's gone through something that really could use it, or maybe their marriage isn't quite what it could be, or your marriage isn't quite what it could be. This is the book to buy. Buy a few copies, do your friends a favor, do your family a favor, and send them a copy. And Mary, it was such a joy to have you. Thank you so much for being here. And of course, all the information will be in the show notes too. And we are out of time, but thank you all for joining us today. And I just pray that until we see each other again, that you keep your heart open and live your love loud.